I'm taking you back into the book of Hebrews today. So these verses from 4:14 through to 5:10, they bring into focus the sacerdotal office of Christ. And first we have some, we'll call them human comparisons. We have some comparisons with the high priesthood of Aaron, and then we have how Christ is superior to that which humans carried out. Embedded in this section that I'm discussing is a motif that runs through the book of Hebrews, that is Christ's sonship and his authority, the qualifications which are embedded in this chapter we're looking at, his qualifications and the nature of his work as high priest that will unfold in later chapters. Because sometimes in touching on different verses, there's a need to go back to some very simple and basic concepts. And probably this week more than at any other time, due to the nature of what I feel I am dealing with on some levels with some people, we will touch on something that, as I've prayed about this, God will touch your heart on this subject as well. I'll get to that when I get into the message. The priesthood was obviously brought on. God ordained the priesthood as we know it. It becomes clear when we study the people being delivered out of Egypt that Moses acting as the deliverer of the people, but he could not stand in, and God chose Aaron to stand in and do that office, which essentially God was unfolding the pattern of redemption for us, that man could not stand without a mediator, that man had a need of covering. We see that right there after the sin in the garden where God has to kill an animal and cover them. They had covered themselves, and their covering of fig leaves was not sufficient. And it's not because God said, I don't want you to be nude, or fig leaves won't keep you warm, but rather there was a need right at the beginning to shed blood, which I've encountered many people that don't like the subject, but that is woven into the pattern and history of redemption. You don't like that, then obviously you don't want to be redeemed God's way, because that is how God demonstrated this pattern. In the priesthood, Aaron went in, of course, once a year, the Day of Atonement, the Great Day of Atonement, and the need for offerings, sacrifices and offerings, was to be repeated in order for the people to remain covered. Now, I want to just touch on this. It'll come up later in the message. But there's an incident early on in the unfolding of that priesthood regarding Aaron's sons and their disobedience. They were doing something that looked like it was God's way, the strange fire incident out of Leviticus 10. And this thing displeased God, and the sons of Aaron, these sons that were offering this strange fire, were killed. Now, I wish, oh boy, hold your breath. I wish God would be doing that today, because there's a lot of things that look spiritual. They look like they're God's way, but they're not God's way at all. And there are abundant examples. This is, I think, what's churning inside of me today, to speak to you today, which will come out in the verses we're going to deal with, is the lack of people who will truly hear God's word and act upon it. This touches some very interesting chords within the heart of man when you begin to talk about listening, hearing, and obedience. But I wonder how that would have worked out if, let's go back before the institution of that Aaronic priesthood, and let's go back to the night of the Passover, where the instructions were clearly given on what to do if one wanted the death angel to pass over. And there may have been people that decided, God doesn't mean the blood has to be exactly where he said. So like a little dab will do you, like, that ad. Maybe there were some that just decided, well, we'll just put it here because that suffices. But the instructions were clear. When I see the blood, I will pass over, seeing the obedience of the instructions being carried out. And I feel it's almost like we read those things and they're so either far removed or we will consider them in a legalistic way. But the reality is that God has not changed and his way has not changed. And why am I on this subject? We'll find out that the priesthood required that God's person carry out exactly what God had prescribed. God said, this is the way, and this is how you will do it, and you will follow this that I've prescribed. The great physician says, this is what you need, this is what you will do, and this is how you will do it. And it required a priesthood that would carry that out exactly like that. So this passage begins by telling us a little bit about the concept of the priesthood. We start back at verse 14, and we've already covered this, but that verse 15, we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmities. That is, he cannot sympathize, not just, oh, they're there, but something of an understanding, because why? He experienced all of the infirmities of humanity. The Lord laid them on him, so he understands. I highly urge you that when there are times when you have those lapses and you say, nobody could possibly know what I'm going through. Oh, yes, Jesus does. Exactly. He suffered those things. They were laid upon him, all of them. But wasn't all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. We've covered this before. Now go down to the 5th chapter. For every high priest taken from among men is ordained for men in the things pertaining to God, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sin. So we see clearly laid out there that the purpose of the institution of the priesthood is because sin existed. God didn't just say, well, I'm just going to create some high liturgical pecking order amongst men that can be carried out, but with an express purpose. Who can have compassion on the ignorant and on them that are out of the way, for that he himself is also compassed with infirmity. Speaking of anyone who takes that office, by the way, they have understanding, they're just mere humans, and by reason hereof he ought, as for the people, so also for himself, to offer for sins. And we have now this bifurcation of the ways, in that Aaron had to offer for himself because he was sinning man. Christ offered himself, sinless man. There's the bifurcation beginning. No man taketh this honor unto himself, but he that is called of God, as was Aaron. So also Christ glorified not himself to be made a high priest. And here we have a partial quotation. This started us on our trek to Psalm 2. But he that said unto him, Thou art my son, today have I begotten thee. We have this partial quotation for good reason. The psalmist understood the psalm better in his frame than we do in modern terms, using only a portion that represented what, again, the Apostle Paul picks up in Acts 13:33. This Jesus, whom God raised up, using this scripture right here, quoting from Psalm 2 in that section. And we have a very clear picture. The reason for using this, which tells us of the resurrected Christ, speaking of his resurrection. And then, as you read down, as he saith also in another place, Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and supplication with strong crying and tears unto him that was able to save him from death, and was heard in that he feared, which is not a good translation, but that's not my focus today. We'll probably correct that on festival. Though he were a son, yet learned he obedience by the things which he suffered. You might see a semicolon, after he feared, after he suffered, and then verse 9, being made perfect, he became the author of eternal salvation unto all them that obey him. Another semicolon, and what closes like a chiasmus of sorts in verse 10, called of God a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. And of course, the writer says, we have many things to say, hard to be uttered because you're dull of hearing. Well, that's a nice way to talk to the congregation, isn't it? That's why, when you read the Bible, you have a pattern of what the man or person of God should not be worried too much about stepping on toes. When it comes to, you may feel a little step on your toe momentarily, but if it's for the saving of the soul, it's worth the momentary stepping on the toes. Does that make sense? Yes. Good, because this preacher from Hebrews didn't seem to be too worried, and neither am I, because I'm more concerned about the soles than the toes. And I had, had my toes stepped on a couple of times too. Not pleasant, but it's needed sometimes. So I want us to look at this very carefully. I'm going to be focusing on verses 8 and 9, but I want us to look at this in understanding, because this whole section must be taken together. And unfortunately, because of what I'll call some interesting translation, it's not necessarily erroneous. It makes it complex to understand the whole. What we have is, we'll be discussing the occasion of Christ's work, the source of his work, the function of his work, the qualifications of his work, and the outcome of his work. But all of that could not be discussed if we weren't understanding what exactly is being said in verse 9. I'm just going to jump into that immediately so we can kind of get that out of the way. And on my tablet, I have a portion of the Greek text. We're looking at 5:9. We have here the beginning. I'm starting in midsection, if you will, this kai, and, or also. Here's what I want us to look at. This is an extremely important word for our understanding. King James does something right, it just comes out a wrong way, which needs to be explained. King James is saying, and being made perfect. And being made perfect, 3 English words, are comprised in this one Greek word here. We have teleothis. And why this is important? We have a verb, we have a participle, which explains why the King James has being as a participle, being, and aorist in the Greek, which represents past, but something extremely, if you're not going to understand any of this, I don't really care, but there's one thing I want you to understand, that this is a passive verb. What it means is that Christ didn't go back to the English, being made perfect. He did not perfect himself. And in fact, the word perfect is a bad choice of words, because what this word really should be, we should be understanding this is completed, to complete, to finish. When we read the word perfect or perfect, depending on what we're reading, we tend to think of something else. Our mind then jumps to, and being made perfect, as if Christ may have passed from an imperfect to a perfect state, but that is not so. He was perfect from the beginning. So we must understand what this means. So this word, you'll encounter this word in John 19, when Jesus cries, "It is finished," and the word is tetelestai. It is finished. And then he gave up his spirit, and we see Christ there on the cross, dead. So it's important to understand what this means. This teleo word, being a participle, we might say and being, and that's why I said being is okay, and even made is okay. That does indeed give some passive force. The problem I have is with that perfect. And I would say, and being made complete, but even more than that is finished. And that can only, in the passive realm, be understood as Christ being raised from the dead. So, if you remember back there at the beginning when I started talking about Hebrews and we were first getting in, I said there's not too many direct mentions of resurrection, as in, say, Paul's writing or other writings where you can read and it's very plain. But here the grammar has some very clear concepts. So just to make sure we're on the same page, if this was an active, we would say that he was perfected. He was the agent of his perfection. Or if it was in the middle voice, he became perfect for himself. But it's neither. Passively, essentially, as I've told you many times, grammarians out there who are more advanced, you'll be angry, but for those, because we're not all grammarians here, passive simply means something that is receiving the action or being acted upon. So we can clearly see here that this verb is telling us that, and being made complete, as in his death and resurrection, passive activity. This Jesus did God raise up. There you have it all ties together. So please, if you're going to make some notes, make them on this, because it's a rather strange thing when you read it in English, and being made perfect, which many people who don't read Greek have suggested this means that there was something wrong with Jesus. He had a lack of something, but we knew that he had no lack, and he was perfect from the beginning. This is why the opening chapter of Hebrews tells us 7 things about Jesus, and all point to eternal perfection. There was no lack or lapse. So when you read this, and being made perfect, I want you to understand this has everything to do with his death and resurrection, and nothing to do with moral lapses of any kind. Then we have this interesting word here, egeneto, which from the root of it we would have to become, the Genesis. But this is another interesting, you'll see why this grabbed my attention. Egeneto we have here as he became. King James translating he became. Verb, indicative, which is a factual statement. Aorist, which is in agreement with this aorist. But here's something interesting. It's in the middle, and if you want to get really fancy, it's a middle deponent. What that means is it's active in nature, but it lacks an active voice, but it's middle. So when it says became, he became, you've got to understand that essentially he became something for himself. This activity of being complete, he was acted upon, raised from the dead, and here we have he became for himself. And that's a strange way of talking, but that's what the Greek does. And let me pause there for a minute, because we'll write it here. So, being made, A, and B, what is being translated as he became. And I'm going to put in for himself. Now, let's see if I do this right on another page here. This is Ethiopic, and all I would like you to see in this, this is 5.8 and 5.9, but there's only one thing I really want you to see here, and beginning right here. And the Ethiopic, what they did here was, and when he was perfected. You can see how all of these could be problematic. When he was perfected, it's not clear that we're talking about his death and resurrection. Remember, what comes before that? Though he were a son, yet he learned obedience by the things which he suffered. And there's a semicolon in the King James, and the reason is very clear. That semicolon is to expound on the and being made perfect that comes after, which leads you in the Greek to his death and resurrection. Now, many have speculated that this idea is Jesus praying in the garden, Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. But what needs to be highlighted is perhaps there are things that we can't necessarily read out of Scripture, we can't necessarily understand. He took on flesh, he took on our nature, and although God and man at the same time, he underwent something that had never happened before from God's perspective. From man's perspective, death was since the beginning in the garden when they ate, this day dying, you'll surely die. But from the God perspective, God taking on flesh, dwelling among us, and dying the death of mankind for God's sake, this had never happened. So when we talk about he learned obedience through the things he suffered, I don't think that can possibly even be touched on as through his lifetime, which most people would like to say this is the understanding. And although I agree there are many things that he suffered, and I've discussed them, rejection, being left alone by his disciples. He came to his own received him not. Being spit upon, being humiliated, hanging naked in open shame. These are all things in his lifetime, but then there are things that he learned that we do not yet know. Why? Because he is the first goer going beyond us. We have not yet tasted death. He tasted death for all humanity. And what happens from the now, from the time of your last breath and my last breath to the time of being with him, he tasted that first, but we have no record of what that's like. So to explain this in great depth would be to say a person, a human, can understand some of the things that I think remain a mystery until one has passed through the same valley and emerged just like the Lord, which we have not yet here. We're still in our flesh containers. So you understand what I'm saying? There are certain things that we cannot profess to know. I know there's a movie out right now about the true story of a child who had the near-death experience and claims he went to heaven. And well, I've heard a lot of things. Don't get me wrong. Most of the people who go and see those types of movies, usually their faith is not settled in factual understanding of what Christ did. So they're still trying to latch on by a natural way, and Hollywood's an expert at presenting those natural things. So I'm not against movies. I don't want you to think I'm against movies. I just think that most movies, and I don't like violence or gory things, but if you're going to go see something, be entertained. And if you're going to go see something that somebody's saying is biblical according to Hollywood or even according to some religious experience, it shouldn't be the criteria or the basis for your faith. Your faith should be rooted and grounded in the facts concerning the resurrected Christ. Now, having said that, let's go back to the Ethiopic for a minute. So, when he was perfected, he himself, Ethiopic has two possible words. He was either the remunerator or the recompense. Kind of interesting. Recompense of salvation, the reward of salvation, to all those, to all them or those who, and this is, I love this word. This is one of my favorite words. It's up here. This is obey. I'm gonna have you pronounce this word because you're gonna love it. You're gonna walk around the rest of the day saying this word. To him, and Redeemer, Olam, forever, just like the Hebrew, forever, to forever. I got to find a good color. Yata Zazu. Ta'azaza or Aziza. So, you know, when you think of obedience next time, I want you to think of Yata Azazu. Yatazazu. I love this language, it's great. But what I want you to see is it could be confusing, and when he was perfected, he himself, it could be challenging to understand what this might mean. I even picked apart through the various, both the Sahidic and the Coptic, which I won't bore you with, but I also picked apart the Hebrew, and that helped a little bit. And I have it on my tablet, but I'll just read verses 8 and 9, and it'll be word for word. And though even he was a son, he learned, that is, for you people studying Hebrew, he learned is in the pual, which is kind of interesting. He learned as in a passive recipient in bearing the burden to obey the voice of the commandment. And he, attaining and becoming complete, he became to all who obey Shema, source of salvation forever and ever. So we have definitely a difficulty, and certainly the Greek is probably the best way to approach this. So let's go back to this. We have this passive being made complete or finished. We're talking about his death and resurrection. He became for himself. He became what for himself? Pasin, tois, to all, and here's our word for obedience, to all who are obeying him. That is, and I'm going to do this, it'll be probably the last part of the grammar here, so hold your brain. This is, we've seen this before in Greek. Akoe, we get our English word acoustics, hearing, akoe. And in the Greek, it starts off with akoe can be like in one of the Gospels, it says, and his fame went abroad. Literally, the hearing about him went abroad. So when we add hupa to the front, we have an emphasis on obedience. And this is a verb, it's a participle for us, present, which means it's ongoing. You don't stop. It's active. We are to obey. Dative, it's inside of us. That's the best way I can explain it. So he became for himself to all those who are ongoing, on an ongoing basis, ongoing, continuous, obeying him. He became the atheos. We covered this in one of those past messages. He became the source. King James says the author, but he became the source of soteria, salvation eternal. And when people talk about, well, isn't there another way? And people get very dogmatic. They like to have the discussion about, well, isn't there another way? It can't just be this way. And the problem with that is that failure to recognize humanity's fallen condition in this very never before happened event of Christ coming in the flesh produces, as he is, we saw this, he's the pioneer, the first goer, he's the King James, captain of our salvation, produces him, as we see it, to those who obey him, ongoing. He becomes the source. I want you to think of, if you're going to go to find water, you want to look for the source, then the water will flow. He becomes the source of eternal salvation. There is no other source. You can talk about comparative religions and how people would like to believe they are saved, but there is no other place. And this is pretty clear. The source of eternal salvation. Now, the writer of Hebrews loves the concepts of eternal, because later on he'll talk about eternal redemption. He'll talk about an eternal inheritance. He'll also talk about eternal judgment. Here he's speaking of eternal salvation. And the once saved, always people will come to this verse and say, you see, because their interpretation of this verse is he's the source of eternal foundation, of eternal salvation, And essentially, as long as you are part of the source now, you can never be lost or lose your salvation. The only problem with that is that those same people fail to read the admonition that is being given to this church or these people, which will talk about their dull of hearing problem and how they're being warned that if they don't begin to faith again, to put faith into operation, they will not be part of the people who are part of the source. They will be their own source somewhere else. But that's why he'll talk about eternal judgment as well. So I like looking at this for many reasons. Being made, we're talking about his death and resurrection. He became. And he didn't just become. A lot of people talk about John 3:15 and 16, God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, and finish by saying, you see, this is the way it is. Well, the reality is that he was obedient. Philippians 2 talks about him being obedient even unto death, the death of the cross. And here we have that same picture. By the way, the verb is the same in Philippians as it is here when we look at these concepts. Same setup. It's like God saying the same thing. We read the English and we have all these spins because of our language. But being made complete, it is finished, death and resurrection, he became for himself to all those that obey him. So that's what I want to talk about, those who obey him. And why should this even bother you today? Why should I even disturb you in discussing obedience? For a myriad number of reasons. We get our English word obedience. I should just do this on a new page. We get our English word for obedience. Obedience. Obey. If you, I always tell you, check me out. I don't want you to take my word for it. If you're something you're not sure about, go check me out. You'll need a Latin etymological dictionary to do this. And in the Latin etymological dictionary, you will find under obedience and obey, these two words are put together under one heading, the Latin obedire. Ob, to, towards, and audio. That's self-explanatory. Hearing. We get our English words like auditorium, audience. Auditorium, a place supposedly for hearing or listening, supposedly. So if you're going to look this up, I always tell you, I give you as many of the sources as I can of my research that I do, and I always tell you when I'm quoting somebody else or somebody else's. I know Dr. Scott's translation of this word was running to the voice of the hearer. It's not too far off for me as I checked in my references, going in the direction towards hearing, or if you want to go down the lemma, what is called the lemma of the Proto-Indo-European roots, and you want to go down that pathway, the lemmas, I'm using terms I shouldn't use, the morphemes, the parts of speech that form something from this would be this. There are several what are called morphemes, those parts of speech that still constitute, they still have meaning. And this is one of them. So O in the Proto-Indo-European, if you're looking in a dictionary, either O6 or O8. And O6 is to speak. And O as we're talking about a lemma, a morpheme of language, that which belongs to audio, O. This is to understand or to perceive. So we have two dimensions inside this, but no matter how you want to slice it, you are running to the one who is speaking, and you are also fastening to listen. So I want to say this correctly. Some people will talk about obedience, and they begin down a pathway that starts with subjection to the will or the one who is speaking. And although biblically speaking, that is true, that is absolutely true when it speaks of Christ, and Christ says, my meat is to do the will of the Father, the one who sent me. That was his desire, to carry out the work that God sent him to do. And the problem is, once you bring this word into the church and we begin to talk about obedience, there is an air of legalism that rises up where people suddenly begin to think, well, obedience to God's word means I do this and I don't do that, and this is how I approach it. And if you're approaching it that way, you're completely off the subject. The only way that I can get you and I to best understand why I'm picking this apart from our 9th verse here, becoming the source of eternal salvation unto all them that obey him. The problem is there's a whole lot of people in the church who don't, it's like, well, I think I'm doing this, but if it's explained aright, some people find out they're not even close. The only way to explain this aright, so it has no legalism and it carries no idea of works with it, is to explain how this was approached in the Old Testament. In Exodus 21, you've got the slave who serves his master, and he serves him for his full time that he's obliged to serve him. And when his time of service is fulfilled, it says if he came by himself, he goes out by himself. If he brought a wife, he may leave with his wife. And it goes through explaining all of that. And then it says if that servant says, he's free to go, but he says, I don't want to go. I love my master. Can you imagine that? Servitude like that. I don't want to go. I love my master. Then it says of that one, his ear was nailed to the door with an awl. Now I want you to bring that picture into the New Testament. If we say, I love my master, our ear should be fastened to the door. The door is Christ. Without that understanding, people will try and practice and put in some form of legalism that can never be carried out. Think of the servant. He said, I don't want to go. I love my master. Well, then bring your ear over here. And your ear is nailed to the door. Now, there's many ways to try and carve this out so people don't say, well, okay, well, what is it? To all them that obey him. Now, we know clearly from the Gospels and from the epistles that many people heard and they did not obey. Please don't even begin to argue with me about people hearing, because as I pointed out last week, even Jesus' own disciples, while they were with him, he said many things, and he says, let this saying out of Luke's gospel, let this saying sink into your ears. But it says right immediately after that, but they understood not what he was saying. This should not be cause for frustration. Paul says in Romans 10, speaking of the Jews, he says, this is a page out of Isaiah, but he says, who has believed the report, the hearing of us? But they've not all obeyed the gospel. Some heard and they did not obey, but what does that mean? And he begins to talk about how faith comes by hearing and hearing by the word of God. So there's some connection. And you can't just tell me, well, I'm picking this apart for a reason, because I sense something. And there's a few people around me who know when I sense this, it's usually because there's putting my finger on something, it's usually because there's a lot of it that's floating around under the guise of. I want to be able to realign some who are listening. Not all of you are so left field, but there's a few listening to me maybe, that their whole idea of obeying him, he's the source of eternal salvation, but yet you don't want to listen. I'm not even going to apologize for saying this. You don't want to listen to what he says to you through his word. He says, if you love me, speaking to his disciples, or are you his disciples? Are you his learners? Yes. He says, if you love me, Jesus speaking, you keep my commandments. Oh, that's a bad word. He said commandments. Well, okay, that's an English word that conjures up all kinds of ideas, but let me put it this way. Just in the carnal perspective, when you love somebody, you try. I'm speaking flesh now. You try to please them. You ever been with somebody that you could never please, no matter what you did? No matter what you did. Please don't raise your hand, because it might be someone sitting beside you. But no matter what you did, you can never please them. God's not like that. But he has laid out specifically what pleases him. The first criteria, as I said, is faith. And why I point to this word obey very carefully. You know what I'm saying is a true statement. There are a whole lot of people out there that come into the church. They gather under the guise of it. It looks like a religious thing. Remember, I started this by referencing something out of Leviticus 10, the sons of Aaron who did something that looked spiritual, but it wasn't according to what God said, and they died. They were killed. And there's a whole host of these. If you read carefully in the Bible, there's a whole host of these. King Uzziah is one of those that I read, and on the surface in 2 Chronicles 26, verses 16 through 22, nothing doesn't look very wrong, except he was doing something spiritual he shouldn't have been doing. He went in and he began to do the function of the priest by offering the incense. And he began this, well, if you read carefully in that 16th verse that starts that whole section, it says how he was lifted up, essentially usurping the priesthood, and God smote him with leprosy. And he was not cured of his leprosy. He died a leper. So don't think, when we read these things and it's like, well, it's no big deal. But I think what's churning inside of me is amongst people that I have contact with. I'm seeing these things that I can't justify before God. I can't even make an excuse for an ignorance. God's not asking us to be perfect. He's not saying, perform, live up to the standard. Nobody can. But I'm seeing people, specifically, I'll give you an example so you can understand why I'm laboring with this. Because if I labor with this on this one place, chances are it's all over the place. I have two people that work together. They cannot get along. They have been fighting and bickering for years, and they just cannot get along. Even though I have preached here, I've stood before you, and I've preached the message on forgiveness. And I do understand this. There are people that I have to work with, that I just have to work with them. Do you know what I'm saying? I have to work with them. Now, I don't necessarily want to take them out to dinner and hang out with them, but I have to be with them. And then something inside me checks my brain that says, and Christ said to love those people that are unlovable. What's so special about loving the people that love you back? What's the big deal? And I'm looking at my very own staff people, two people who cannot get along, constantly fighting. But then this actually was at the underneath part of this all. He becomes the source of eternal salvation to all those who will obey him. My sheep know my voice. Not Melissa Scott, not Jean Scott. We're speaking of the Word of God that comes by the Spirit in our hearts. And this is where this ceases to become a sermon, and I hope it penetrates to you. Other people can go through the motions and fake Christianity and pretend. I don't want to say I'm not concerned about the other people, but I'm concerned about the people in front of me who don't seem to think that this is them. And I was talking to somebody this week on staff, and I said, the idea that has been propagated by the Catholic Church of Repentance, that is, that tears and the mea culpas, so grossly misunderstood, metanoia, repentance, change of mind, which should produce metamelomai, the sense of grief and sorrow before God of what you've done to him and against him. And I was saying to the staff person, I wish that this would happen to the people around me, and that they would change their mind about how they approach other people. and actually become, if it's God's doing, they become grief-stricken at the discord that they have created, which essentially is like a poison that spreads to other people. Now, you tell me that you can exist that way and read a verse like this. He became for himself the source of eternal salvation unto all them that obey him. It doesn't say to all them that are perfect. It doesn't say to all them who think they're perfect or they're better, but all them who obey him. And if you take what I just said, the going towards the hearing of him, that is his word, his doctrine, his teaching. This is the disconnect. Now, I'm telling you as a person who loves God and who has the fear of God in me. And I don't mean that like people misunderstand. The fear of God as in, what part of this is not being understood? And then I step back and I realize this is a whole lot more than just these two people. There's lots of people who will come in, and as long as they make their presence seen, and I'm just going to say it, there's no way to paint this and make it sound eloquent. It hurts me inside to see people who are wasting their time in something their heart is not committed to, that is pleasing God, and without faith you cannot please him. And how does faith come? By hearing. Well, what words are you listening to that you're still going through the same motions? Now, you might say, how did you get here from there? Because this passage speaks to me. God's not asking me to be perfect. He's not asking you to be perfect, but he is asking you to listen to his word. Now, let me show you why this is so important. Through this book, I just mentioned the staff people. These are real tangible, they exist in front of me. But here's a group of people that the author is writing to, and he specifically is saying, why do you think he keeps saying, today if you'll hear his voice, harden not your hearts. I want you to put flesh and blood on this now, because you've read those things so many times. I want you to put flesh and blood on understanding what that obedience should represent to you today. Let this not just be, we spent an hour here and she talked about some Greek things, but something that actually profoundly begins to settle in with you. That is that it's more important about what God says. Forget about why do you think I say, I don't care. People say all kinds of things about me. I don't care. I'm only worried about what God says. And if you're sitting in front of me, I'm concerned because you are my care. Until you leave here and decide you no longer want to be pastored by somebody who cares more for your soul than being loved by you or liked by the world, until you decide that, it's my responsibility to make sure these things are stirred up so that complacency, much like these whom the writer was talking to, doesn't settle in till you're no longer really hearing. Or you're hearing, but nothing is penetrating. He says, today, if you'll hear his voice, harden not your hearts. Today, if you'll hear his voice, harden not your hearts as in the day of provocation. For some, when they had heard, did provoke. Then he says this in 4:2, for unto us was the gospel preached as well as unto them, but the word preached did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. That's what I'm saying. Well, I know what faith is. Dr. Scott said what faith is. It's action based upon belief sustained by confidence. Well, let's get real. Action on what? Action on what? Is it just that's action? Action on the word. Not running away, Jonah-esque, from the word, running towards the word. And you and I will fall down and miss the mark probably 1,000 or 1,000,000 times before we die. But at least head in the right direction. He goes on to say it again, today. Do you think this is an important theme for the writer? Today, if you will hear his voice, again in 4:7, harden not your hearts. There's a repetition there. Now, the admonition that's coming up in the next chapter is, of whom we have many things to say and are hard to be uttered, seeing you are dull of hearing. Same obedience word. You think that there was a problem there? Yeah. Now, I know what happens. Some of you who have been faithing for so long and you become a little crusty in where you are, that can happen to all of us. Can happen to me. That's why I read when Paul says the caution that he took in preaching to others, he could become a castaway himself. There has never been when people talk about revival, there's never been a revival and a move amongst the people of God until the preached word, the word that is declared, penetrates so deep that it does produce metanoia, it produces repentance, the changing of the mind, that produces deep grief and sorrow of not going God's way. What has been done against thee, O Lord, have I sinned? In going, what's the definition of sin? My way. Every single great move of God has had attached to it an understanding. And subsequently, those moves, I'm sure, became perverted in trying to replicate. And I'm not interested in trying to replicate somebody else's ideas or somebody else's moves. I'm only concerned about here and those who are listening to me. Now, I've been talking about giving, and that's made some people just downright uncomfortable. But if you want to talk about obeying Him, go back and read what He says, Christ, Matthew 6. That's a whole section regarding giving and stewardship, and there's abundant passages. It's like funny ears that we have this strange ability to tune out what we really don't want to hear. Well, are you interested in who you're going to spend eternity with? Or are you just interested in serving yourself and figuring out, I'm comfortable where I am, don't bother me? Because if it's the latter, let me know, I'll pray for you. Probably not much for me to do, but I'll pray for you. As for me, I read this and I'm struck. The psalmist in the Old Testament says, I delight to do thy will. And I think out of this passage, something clear, not just the whole tapestry of we're talking about a high priest, unlike any other high priest, and why he was being compared to all these others. People came against Aaron, namely his sister, and namely others in the camp. What's so special about that? We're not going to listen to him. God talks to us too. I mean, these are all the things that if you toss this all together, you recognize God's only concerned with one thing. Are you listening? Are you hearing what He has to say? Or are you being hardened by the very words that should be breaking down and rebuilding again God's way? So I'm stopped on this. And I'm sincerely hoping that in the process of analyzing and picking apart the verse, something more comes. That's why I said there was this idea that I should present this. But then stopping here, I said, you know what, I do need to do this. Now imagine this, and I'll bring this to a close as quickly as I can. But imagine this. To the disciples who are with Jesus, certain remarks that are made. Now, here comes the storm, and they say, what kind of person is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? Or the disciples that were out there the whole night, and they were toiling, as they said, and caught nothing. And Jesus said, throw out the net again. They said, well, Lord, we've been out here a whole night. Nevertheless, at thy word. And they threw out the net, and the net was so filled they could not contain what was in the net. It's acting in faith that get God's attention, that if people are actually looking at this and saying, well, yes, and I see that He is indeed the source of eternal salvation, and I'm desiring to be close to Him, then listen to what He has to say. And add to that Paul's teaching out of Romans 10. Don't think, well, I'm a do-it-myself person. You know, I think you should study on your own. You should have daily devotions. You should have prayer time by yourself. You should be able to turn on the network and take communion at any time during the day, which is all there. But there's also someone to stand in front of you to preach the word that stirs up at times. I hope at times I'll make you angry. Because if I'm not making you angry at times, that means that I'm not doing my job. And sometimes maybe I'll bring comfort to you. And other times I'll remind you of something that, oh yeah, that's right, I learned that back there. But all the while, there's one focus, and that is to bring you back to, harness and rein in the idea, this concept of obedience, not legalism, that with the hand that says, this is the faith way, you'll go and you'll stay on that path. Well, Pastor, I'm already faithing. Great. Then I suggest you go back and reread this, because the very same staff people that I'm sure said, well, I have faith. My question is, okay, that's wonderful. He becomes the source of eternal salvation unto all them that obey him. Are you connecting the dots with me? I'm not interested in having a disconnected church of people who are busy thinking that, A, it doesn't matter to me. It does. In fact, the more it matters to you, the closer you'll want to press in, the closer you'll want to, it's something that I can't even explain. The closer you press in, the more you will be here, the more you want to participate, the more you are compelled. We say there are some people you can't bat them away with a stick. Those are the people that are pressing in close. No matter how many times they've failed and messed up, they press in. And I'm telling the same ones today, for those who are in this state, there's hope for you. There's hope for me. You've got to go back to the listening device and pray that God hasn't dulled over the ears like the prophet Isaiah. Go and speak to these people, but they won't be able to hear and they won't be able to see. And pray that God restores your ability not only to hear, but to have the heart that burns with love for your master. When you say, well, I love my master and I don't want to go, and I'm not your master, he is. That heart willingly says, Lord, you have my ear. And although we are all disobedient at times and we all fall short repeatedly, Lord, you have my ear. I'm listening. I have, in my case, I'll speak for me, I had to make a lot of mistakes. Where do you think the colloquial expression, you learn by your mistakes, comes from? He learned obedience by the things he suffered. Somebody lifted that off the page essentially to say, you learn by your mistakes, which has nothing to do with that. Jesus didn't make any mistakes. But I can tell you a lifetime of scars and things to my person. I've certainly understood that the faith way and God's way is a much better way than my way. Lord, I don't know who will say this with me today, but Lord, you have my ear. That's my message. You've been watching me, Pastor Melissa Scott, live from Glendale, California at Faith Center. If you would like to attend the service with us Sunday morning at 11 a.m., simply call 1-800-338-3030 to receive your pass. If you'd like more teaching and you'd like to go straight to our website, the address is www.pastormelissascott.com.